To who?
Would you yield a question?
Yes.
You made the argument that Trump received $6 million from China or something, and Hunter Biden received the money from China. Do you know exactly what Hunter Biden did to receive the money from China? Because that's something we've had a hard time trying to figure out. I think I know what Trump's businesses were. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just know what his businesses are. I don't know what the Biden's businesses are.
And you don't know what it's not.
Well,
I'm sorry?
And you don't know what it's not either.
But what I'll say...
So you have no idea why or why not he received that money.
What I will say is...
You have no evidence about it.
Can I submit this MSNBC or this NBC article for the record as well?
Without objection, so ordered.
And I will say that in this article, it specifically says that the source of a number of Trump's monies, it was unclear. Okay. He just said that he did have businesses there. He did say that he had opened some bank accounts in China, but they could not find the source of the monies that were paid to him from China.
Chair recognizes Mr. Turner from Kansas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here today. There's a lot of information. Let's try to quickly lay this out for the American people, okay? So quick answers. How long have...
Two very quick things. First of all, have you noticed certain people really do need to stay in their own line, and they do when it comes to one of the stars, as far as I see it, in the Democrats' House Representatives, Congresswoman JASMINE CROCKET. Do you see how she again deals with Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, just like... easy. The other thing, please, 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 if you have a second, press the thanks button so that I can buy my team a coffee. Or you could even, we do have our own brand of coffee, click on www.hollywoodroast.com and buy yourself some of America's freshest roasts. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to be redundant. I think that if we haven't figured out by now, we know that y'all are constantly failing, right? And honestly, our job is to win for the American people. And so while this committee tends to be probably the most divided committee in the Congress, especially this Congress, it is amazing the times that we can agree. And we agree that right now taxpayer dollars are being wasted. I'm gonna just keep it all the way real. And what's frustrating to me is that while I applaud my colleagues from the other side of the aisle bringing this and pointing out that there is definitely a ridiculous amount of waste when it comes to defense, and that doesn't mean I'm anti-defense before the haters on Twitter start getting crazy, because we all want to be free, we all want to feel safe here in this country, and we appreciate what defense does for us. But everyone has to be held accountable, especially when we are dealing with the budget deficits that we're dealing with, especially when we are dealing with the inflation that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, I sat through Rules Committee this week, and it took everything in me not to blow up. Because I had colleagues from the other side of the aisle as we are dealing with NDAA, and we have real things to address, such as how are we going to get DOD on track? Do you know what they wanted to talk about? Do you know what these amendments are going to deal with? They're going to deal with things that don't have anything to do with the budget, such as they want to talk about if they're going to deny access to health care for women. That's a priority in NDAA. They wanted to talk about whether or not trans folk would have access to the health care that they need. That's what they want to talk about. They want to deal with the things, and of course they want to fight about Ukraine and not recognize that it is important that this modern day democracy is upheld. So what I want to talk about is getting to the point that, number one, we only got here because there were certain people that decided that they were going to hold the entire country hostage in the debt ceiling fight. And so as part of the agreement was that all of those people that need Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all of those programs that people are relying upon, SNAP benefits, as we're dealing with record inflation, they got less money and defense got more. That is exactly what happened. Somebody got more, somebody got less, because we cared more about let's try to balance the budget on the backs of people that are only getting $6 a day for things like SNAP benefits instead of focusing on the waste that's going on here. And so the only question that I have for you is, what do you need from us? What is needed so that we can actually stop being performative? Because what I don't want us to do is try to pretend as if we really care about this waste that's going on by having this hearing on the same day that, as it's already been said by my colleague, Mr. Biggs, this is going to get voted out. And y'all are going to get more money. That's going to happen. And you know what? We're still going to have more people that are facing homelessness in this country. We're still going to have more people that are hungry in this country. And honestly, I can promise you, I would rather give more people that $6 a day to eat than to sit here and say, well, we just haven't fixed it. If we know that the problem is that we have not modernized, what is the problem with modernizing? Why can't we? Because it's not for a lack of resources. Is there anyone that can tell me why we cannot modernize, especially since we have the best military in this country, but we can't figure out how to count our money and count our guns? We can't figure that out. Somebody help me. Anybody. This is a real question. What is the problem?
So with respect to clean audit and auditability, we, as has been previously said, retirement of the legacy systems is a significant part of the path to do that. And so we do need to get after that. That's the most significant from the procurement.
Let me stop you right there. We need to get after that. Tell me why we haven't, is my question.
I think it's just a matter of the number of systems that we're having to evaluate for retirement and incorporation of a modernized business process to capture.
Let me ask you this. So can we agree that all the systems need to go? I mean, how modern are any of these systems? Can we not just agree that we need to scrap it and we need to get up to date? This is the same body where we're dealing with AI conversations. Like we haven't even been brought up to today, let alone the future. Can we not just agree that we need to scrap and we need to move on instead of like pontificating? Because I feel like that's what's happening, and it's happening on the American people's dime.
The approach we're taking is to promulgate standards that are feeding the data between those systems. So regardless, I don't think it's realistic that we're going to be able to clean slate them all. And so the systems that we have, forcing procurement standards and other standards so that the systems can talk to one another.
And Mr. Chair, I know I'm out of time, but if I could just ask this last question. Can you give me a reasonable amount of time to get through to modernizing these systems? Just a reasonable number.
There's systems within my responsibility. I could speak to those, but I'm not familiar.
And okay, so speak to
I would
those.
say within a 5-year period.
Thank you so much. With that, I yield.
Congressman Palmer.
Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much for being here. I know it's a long day. I'm actually out of Texas, and so I'm a little familiar with border issues. But I first want to begin by making it clear that Democrat or Republican, I think that we all can agree that there is an issue in this country as it relates to drugs, period. And I also want to be clear for anyone that may not know, but all drugs come across all borders, to be perfectly honest. It's not just fentanyl, and that has been an issue for quite some time. We also know that fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, and we know that the opioid epidemic has been on the rise for quite some time. But I do want to make sure that I clarify a few things. This is what happens when you're at the end. You've got to clarify a few things. So number one, it's my understanding that the number for 2019 was 900,000 instead of the claim that, you know, the numbers somehow were on the rise, seemingly insinuating once President Biden was in office. But that 900,000 number that was crossing in 2019 was double what we had seen in the past decade. And in 2019, the president was still Trump. So I do want to do that, as well as I want to acknowledge the fact that in 2020, we know that COVID was happening, which was also complicating issues, and not every country had the same access to be able to survive COVID. We know that the United States was actually leading the world as it relates to trying to survive this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, and the rest of the world was following us. So for some people, it legitimately was life or death, and honestly, it typically is a life or death issue. I also want to ask you one quick question about the cartels. As someone who has had to deal with cartels in courtrooms before, we know that they are quite powerful. We know that they are also problematic. And it is my understanding that the cartels were continually spreading disinformation so that people would cross the border, because guess what? If there are more people crossing the border, does that not make it more difficult for y'all to spot the cartels in a big crowd versus if it's just a couple of people that are crossing over?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. So the cartels certainly have a capacity to overwhelm us with these groups that are crossing.
Absolutely.
You know, I would like to point just for a quick second, you know, you mentioned COVID, and obviously COVID has hit us hard in Tucson sector. You know, in the 2 years that I've been there, we lost 3 agents to COVID as well, because, you know, as frontline employees, we can't work from home. We can't take a lot of the precautions that other people did, and dealing with populations that have come from all over the world and have crossed some of the sort of hottest spots on the globe for COVID, and we're housed south of the border with no PPE in these terrible conditions, and then crossed and contacted our agents, caused quite a bit of loss of life throughout CBP, but in my sector, 3 agents in the last 2 years.
Thank you for that, and I am sorry for your loss. Let me also point to another issue. I think that Haiti may have been mentioned at some point in time. I don't know if anyone pointed out that the president was killed July 7th, 2021 in Haiti, which also caused for a more dangerous situation for those that were living there, and could have prompted people to want to cross the border. And I'm going to hit one other point, and then I've got another question to ask, and that's around there was an issue of jailing migrants and separating families under the Trump administration. Are you aware of that? That children were in cages?
Ma'am, thanks again for the question. One thing I can tell you about separation, you know, it's come up here a few times.
But let me just be real clear. Are you aware that there were people in cages, including children?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Well, moving on. The next question that I have then is, are you familiar with an Operation Lone Star out of the state of Texas?
We are familiar with that operation, ma'am.
Okay. So I sat on the committee in the Texas House that dealt with Operation Lone Star, where we had a number of hearings. Are you aware that the purpose was to make sure that we could go after those that were trafficking drugs, go after the cartel, those that were trafficking people, and make sure that we were keeping the border safe? But the only thing that we were finding is that the majority of our monies were being spent on basically asylum seekers, and we were not actually getting at the cartels and the bad folk that we were trying to keep out. I want to say close to 90% of the people that were being incarcerated for simple trespass, and they were just trying to seek asylum. Are you aware of that?
I am not aware of that.
Okay. Also, I don't know how much discussion there's been, but I know that this was always an issue, and it was about whether or not we were going to build a wall. You would agree with me that a wall is not going to keep bad people out, because when drug traffickers and cartel decide they're going to do something, the wall ain't going to do nothing.
Gentlelady's time's expired, but feel free to answer the question.
Well, we spoke earlier about barrier as being just one of the many tools that Border Patrol agents utilize to get the job done on the border. So I think that barrier is effective in certain strategic locations along the border to manage whatever may come, whether it's vehicles or people attempt to enter through certain locations there.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
The distinguished gentlewoman from Dallas is recognized, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go at this a little bit differently. First of all, let me thank each and every one of you for your service to our country. And I think that as members of Congress, we should do everything that we can to support you, and we should listen to you, because this is the work that you do every day, and it's why we bring you in to testify. Seemingly, everyone has different ideas of what you do instead of wanting to listen to you. But nevertheless, I think we could save a lot of time if Congress worked remotely, because I know time and money. Because I know that it takes me almost 3 hours to get here from Dallas. I've got another freshman colleague that is from Hawaii, and we all know what happened in Hawaii here recently. And she travels and leaves her husband and her 2 boys to get here, yet seemingly showing up to work doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna get anything done. Because the last time I checked, we are currently facing a government shutdown. It is pending, and people have shown up, but they have not shown up to actually do the work. So we're concerned about telework, but what we really need to be concerned about is whether or not we're gonna do our work when we're in the building, because we are the ones that are supposed to make sure that we pass appropriations bills so that we can fund what you're doing as we talk about backlogs. So let me talk about some of the reasons for some of the backlogs that have been brought up. By a show of hands, I'm curious to know, any of your agencies, are they at 100% capacity as it relates to having the workforce that you need? No one? Ain't none of y'all got 100 people? Oh, okay. So maybe you need some money so that you can hire some people. Let me also ask you, and I know that it was brought up a little bit earlier, I believe it was you, Mr. Dorman, that talked about the fact that you are looking at what private industry is doing and competing. Is it not true, and anyone who feels like I am stating a falsehood, please say something. Is it not true that the majority of private industry is offering flexibility and better pay than the federal government right now? Okay, all right, so it is hard to compete because number one, we ain't giving y'all no money. Number two, we're showing up every day, but we not doing our jobs because we seemingly are about to shut down, because I don't know how I'm just a freshman, but from what I've been told, I don't know how we're gonna get through 12 appropriation bills in all this time, especially when we keep cutting votes back because they don't have the votes. So we may need to focus on how we can do better at our jobs and support you so that y'all can take care of our constituents. So with that, there are options on the table. Republicans and Democrats, we need to come together and find common ground. And we did this a little earlier this year. I was working on a retention option because in June, I led a letter to the Secretaries of Defense and State and the OPM director about concerns regarding the retention of federally employed military spouses. This letter was co-led by a Republican actually on my oversight committee. I also introduced an amendment to the NDAA directing the Secretary of Defense to provide employment flexibility to military spouses deployed by the department. This amendment was co-sponsored by several Republicans, including, again, one on oversight. The military is currently facing a recruitment crisis. This is why it's important, more important than ever, that we retain current military families. Over 1/3 of active duty military families cite difficulties securing spousal employment as a reason for leaving the service. In fact, in the past decade, military spouses have experienced persistently high unemployment rates, hovering around 21%, nearly 7 times the national average. Consider Jessica, a military spouse of 19 years, currently stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas, with her active duty spouse. Jessica is a senior passport specialist with the State Department. Her husband recently submitted his Army retirement packet because his transfer order meant Jessica wouldn't be able to work at State because it doesn't offer remote or telework flexibilities. How is this protecting our country? And I'm sure the majority of you never heard about this bipartisan amendment. You heard about all the other trash that they wanted to put on the floor that had nothing to do with keeping our country safe. What we need to do is focus in on the priorities. And the priorities aren't culture wars. That's not the priorities. The priorities are making sure that people are working and people are safe. And regardless of what the president said, and I love the president, I support him. Let me say that right now. COVID is still around. We have members that are out right now because they are sick with COVID. So for those that missed the memo, COVID does still exist, and these flexibilities allow people to not only be safe, but they also make sure that we are keeping our country safe. So thank you for what you do every day. Thank you for putting up with these questions. Thank you for fighting for a country that somehow doesn't seem like it's fighting half as hard for you and your employees. And with that, I would just ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record a statement from the Parallel Professionals, EFM, MOH, and the U.S. Department of State Employee Organizations for the spouses, partners of foreign service professionals who are civil servants, government contractors, and who work at U.S. missions abroad. Mr. Chairman.
It'll be entered the record. Thank you very much.
And I will yield.
Gentlewoman yields back your time.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I rise today appalled by the Speaker's debt ceiling bill. Right now, the Speaker stands alone, threatening to not pay bills we owe to advance his personal policy preferences. If we don't pay our bills, there will be catastrophic consequences for everyone. The interest rate will skyrocket, making it nearly impossible to afford a home, a car, closing opportunities for upward mobility for millions of Americans. The stock market will crater as investors lose faith in the ability of our government to perform even the most basic function because of the Speaker's bill. The result would be millions of Americans' retirement accounts wiped out. For years, the threat of such economic catastrophe historically made even the threat of default off limits. But the Speaker knows that what he had is an extreme minority in his caucus, and what he wants is deeply unpopular. So he is trying to hold our government hostage. He stands alone because he knows that no Democrat will support this ransom. So he needs each and every Republican to fall in line behind him. I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle know that their constituents are watching to see who their representative came to Congress to fight for, your Speaker or your seniors. The Speaker's bill will add additional work reporting requirements for seniors in their 50s in order to receive basic food assistance. Across the country, there are no less than 3 million seniors who could lose food assistance because of this bill. So my colleagues must make a choice, your Speaker or your seniors. And because everything in D.C. is filled with jargon, I want to pause for a moment to make sure we all understand who the Speaker's bill is targeting. The people the Speaker is targeting are seniors in their 50s who don't even have $6 a day for food. That's all SNAP pays, is $6 a day for food. But the Speaker's bill would deny even that paltry aid to hundreds of thousands of our constituents. Soon, those on the other side of the aisle must decide who matters more to them, your Speaker or your seniors. And make no mistake, this isn't about getting people to work. If you work twice what was required, a full 40-hour week, at minimum wage, which frankly is most of what is on the table for these seniors, you would still be on SNAP. The only way the Speaker's bill saves money, which he does say, is if people have their benefits stripped away, if seniors go hungry. So each of my colleagues must ask who matters more, your Speaker or your seniors. And the Speaker's bill will kick seniors off SNAP rolls. Many seniors can't find a job at all because they face age discrimination. There is a reason the current law exempts those over 49 to expect them to have the same odds of finding a job as a younger recipient. It is callous and cruel. So ask yourselves, who did you come to Congress to serve, your Speaker or your seniors? Even though the bill is only supposed to apply to able-bodied adults without dependents, that claim is laughable. Many of our constituents in their 50s are grandparents. They have child care responsibilities, even if the child isn't their dependent. Requiring them to neglect their grandchild or else go hungry is cruel and heartless. I hope my colleagues ask themselves who they came to Congress to serve, your Speaker or your seniors, because so many seniors will go hungry if the Speaker's bill becomes law. As the pandemic SNAP policies are ending, state agencies are responsible for updating participants' information so those eligible for assistance don't go hungry. But in many states, no outreach or only perfunctory outreach was performed. My concern is that if the Speaker's bill becomes law, tens of thousands of seniors who think they aren't subject to these reporting requirements will suddenly find themselves without benefits. And if for any reason these seniors are denied benefits under the Speaker's bill, they will be ineligible for food assistance for the next 3 years. So when we vote on this bill, we will be voting on a very simple question: support your Speaker or support your seniors. The burden lies with each of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. It is within your range, it is within your power to protect our seniors. Right now, the Speaker stands alone with a deeply unpopular proposal. Each of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are asked to starve our seniors. If that is the policy of this House, that responsibility will be entirely on your shoulders. The choice is now yours. Quite simply, each Republican must answer the question, who do you fight for, your Speaker or your seniors? With that, I yield.
That is Texas Congresswoman JASMINE CROCKET shaming Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, in which she sits, over their pro-Trump obstructionism in a hearing where those Republicans voted to recommend a contempt charge against Hunter Biden, who is not a public servant but is named Biden. That is what the House Republican majority considers governance in 2024. And Congresswoman Crockett joins me now. It was messy today inside that hearing room, which I guess is sort of par for the course. What is your takeaway from today in terms of what they are after, what they're trying to do?
So you're insinuating that I learned something, that I gleaned something.
I don't know if there's anything to be learned, actually. I watched part of it and didn't glean a ton.
It didn't reveal anything more than what we already know, which is that this is more so just about making sure that they are showing their loyalty to Trump and that Trump can pat them on the back and hopefully won't go against them and cause them a problem in their primary. It has nothing to do with the American people. It has nothing to do with truth and transparency. It has nothing to do with fairness. It has everything to do with making sure that they're pleasing